Hello and welcome to All in Motion. Thank you to my guests and all of you for taking the time to tune in. This is episode 38, Veterans Treatment Court and Mental Health. Our next guest is no stranger to All in Motion. This is his third interview. Ladies and gentlemen, Attorney David Dischley.
Average person gets in trouble and let's say a DWI, and they blow up a 0.16, so they're looking at a 5-day mandatory minimum, at least in Virginia, of jail time. Criminal court is the way that society gets its licks of that person who violated a law. Veterans Treatment Court is actually the government saying, we recognize that you're a little bit different than the average person that comes here. We are recognizing your service, and we want to rehabilitate you in a way that we're never going to see you again in the criminal justice system. And but it's more of a rehabilitative program. And I'll give you a perfect example. I represent this Army guy who got into Fairfax's Veterans Treatment Court. He sold a little bit of drugs and had a gun on him, right? These are serious offenses where the average person is going to go to jail for a minimum of 7 months in Virginia, right? So the low end of the sentencing guidelines for distribution of a Schedule 1 or 2 controlled substance with no criminal history is 7 months, and most judges give that for first-time offenders. The high end's only like a year and 3 months. Don't quote me on that. You rarely see people getting the high end as long as it's not a large amount of a substance. And then you add the gun into the distribution and you start looking at mandatory minimum sentences for having a firearm while distributing drugs. Well, when the person's evaluated for Veterans Treatment Court, if they were a veteran and they're deemed eligible, the prosecutor has a large amount of latitude in what happens to that person. And again, his defense attorney is obviously pushing for the best possible outcome. So, my client who just entered the program, who, I'm a little concerned about, based on, some, what he terms as medicine, because he can't use his medicine while he's in the Veterans Treatment Court, even though it's legal in Virginia. So, but it's really focused on that rehabilitative aspect, getting them the help that they need so that they don't find themselves in that situation. And the reward at the end is huge, because it's at the general district court level. It's not in the circuit court level. So, they're not going to be a convicted felon at the end of that program. And a lot of these people are going to earn a dismissal if they successfully make it through Veterans Treatment Court. It's almost the exact opposite of the purpose of the criminal courts, right? Prosecutors in criminal court want convictions. Prosecutors that are running Veterans Treatment Court want rehabilitation and are willing to not get the conviction if the person is successful. So they're great programs.
From your listen, it doesn't have to be exact. From on the tip of your head, percentage of veterans you represented or of overall from you, and then just in general, the percentage of veterans that have successfully completed the program.
So there was a period of time in Fairfax where they had the Veterans Court, and nobody would put their clients on the docket if they were veterans, because essentially you'd have a client who has like a DUI case, right? Or, a lot of veterans were, DUIs or, misdemeanor drug possession, like petty stuff. And to put them in a 9-month, 6-month, 1-year program to get, a reduction to like a reckless driving, it wasn't equitable to do that. And I had a client who just recently I was like, nah, I'm not going to have you evaluated for it, because it was just a DWI case. And what he would have had to go through to earn the dismissal of the DWI wasn't worth it, right? And so we're actually able to work with one of the prosecutors that run the Veterans Treatment Court and got him a deal that was outside of doing the Veterans Treatment Court. So I'm going to be very frank with you. The percentage of veterans that I've had that were successful in completing the program has been 0 so far, because I have about 4 that just started the program, because the program's just starting to actually be beneficial to them, and they're starting to accept people with these serious offenses that, it's worth the bang for their buck. Now, mental health dockets, historically, like Loudoun County in Virginia has a wonderful mental health docket. And I've had about 6 clients enter that docket that were determined eligible, and all of them have completed successfully. There's really a push that once you're on those dockets, they want you to be successful. I had one client that stumbled twice in that program, like in the mental health docket. And with the contract that you sign, the court can impose sanctions. So, when he violated, the terms of the program, instead of just being kicked out, right, he spent a weekend in jail. But he was allowed to continue with the program. And people understand that when they get in the program, that, the court can impose sanctions on you, but allow you to continue. They can hold you back from progressing to the next stage, which might continue the amount of time that you're in that program, or they can determine that, the program's not suitable for you. So, but again, there's always an aim towards getting them through it. And so when you see these counselors and these, the people that work for the courts, especially the judges, they do a great job in motivating the people to push through the court. But, in Fairfax, they just started it used to be only very severe situations where, you had to meet like really extensive criteria to get on a veterans treatment docket. They've actually lowered that criteria, and they've made an intermediate docket, which is very appealing to, I think, the average veteran that's suffering from PTSD or, has some disability rating. But like me, who's a veteran who didn't serve during the time of conflict, has no disability rating, has nothing through the VA, if I went out and, decided to sell a kilo of Coke to an undercover cop, I wouldn't be eligible for the program. So not every veteran can get in it. But again, they've lowered the criteria.
I did see that, to your point, not to cut you off, but I think it's 10% minimum disability, VA disability, to qualify for that, eligibility for qualify for the veteran treatment. Cool.
Yeah. So, yeah, and they're great programs. And, again, when I put somebody in a specialized docket, I expect them to be successful on it, because, the players that are involved, and, they're not doing that docket because they have to. They're doing that docket because they want to, whether it's the prosecutor, the judge, or the counselors that involved. They want to help people. So, I think, and they use the other veterans that are in it, the people that are close to graduation, to mentor the younger ones that as they're coming up through it. So, there's a process as you go through it. And it's, again, anybody I've had to complete a mental health docket, I haven't seen them back in the criminal justice system, at least they haven't called me. So but again, I think a lot of them have, in the time that they've been in those dockets, they've gotten their medication right. They've gotten used to counseling. They've gotten used to, having accountability. And, once you make those a regiment, and at first it's forced and then it becomes voluntary, now you have the skills to be successful moving forward in your life, and where to go to get help.
Why it's so important that mental health is like getting, COVID or you know what I mean? Or getting, because people commit suicide.
Yeah. Well, it's a real problem. I mean, when people get to the end of the rope and they feel like they're completely hopeless, what resources do you send out? Police departments have started, CIT training, and, which, has a mental health aspect to it. So, it's not just go out and lock them up, it's go out, interact with them, talk to them. But, there's a lot of people out there, especially veterans, that, they don't want the cops involved in their business, and they don't want the government involved in their business. And so, when somebody's suffering from a mental health issue, it's really the friends and family around him that have to recognize it and then figure out how to deal with it, and I deal with it with my clients. You'll identify a pattern in something that they're talking about, or, an issue that keeps coming up, and, you'll make the recommendation to go to treatment. But, a lot of them go, nah, I don't need medication, or I don't need, counseling. And so, and a lot of people don't believe in it. They go, I can deal with it. Like, oh, this is plagued my family for years. And you can't force somebody to do that. So the best thing that you can do for them is try to get them into a program that will teach them how to help themselves. And, that's, I think, where we fail in mental health treatment. The counselor wants to keep making money, right? The psychiatrist wants to keep getting paid. The pharmacy wants to keep selling drugs. So, why would you give somebody the skills to help themselves when it doesn't perpetuate the cycle? And I think that's a big problem in society, is that, professionals don't want to give out the advice so that people can, truly get better, and, that's why, if you ever talk to somebody who's been involved in AA or NA or, other group therapy sessions that are led by peers, they have a lot of success when they actually work the program, because they are learning the skills themselves to regulate their mental health issue or their substance abuse issue. But again, mental health issues just run the gamut. So, I grew up with my stepdad's brother was schizophrenic, and we were kind of isolated from him. I think I maybe had 4 or 5 interactions with him over, the course of my childhood before I joined the Marine Corps. And, we were shunned from him, instead of, integrating him more in the family. And, despite his outburst and his issues, but, and a lot of veterans suffer from, like paranoid delusions when they come back from being overseas, or, hallucinations. And, these things can be treated, but, and again, I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but, when somebody's paranoid, they're more apt to get in trouble, with criminal law. And, I've been seeing it a lot lately in my cases, that, the paranoia has been, whether it's schizophrenia or, a personality disorder that's causing it, has actually been creating more problems for people, and dragging them into the criminal justice system. I mean, a term that we never would have used 5 years ago, which, with a prosecutor is, this is a mental health case. Now we're talking about cases from a mental health perspective, and we're providing more mental health documentation to prosecutors so that they can understand our client's not a criminal, they're suffering from a mental health issue. And, and again, if it's a veteran or if it's a regular person suffering from that, I think the courts should deal with that differently than, if it's just somebody who's, stealing money because, they want to buy a boat or a car, or, they're selling drugs because, they don't want to work hard to actually earn a living, because most drug dealers I know are pretty smart people. And, if they put their skills to good use, in starting a business, they could probably run a successful business. They're just taking a shortcut, because it's easy. And so again, the most people in the criminal justice system are dealing with some type of mental health issue, or substance abuse issue. Again, I can't even think of a case that I currently have where I can say that the person doesn't have a mental health issue or a substance abuse issue.
And as long, like before the whole fentanyl, got out of control and the opioid crisis in America, what are your thoughts? And I know I don't just want to get your opinion because you're the expert. What should those people be in jail if they never did anything violent and no one ever died from the drugs that they sold?
That's such a hard question because, and this is an argument that I get into with a lot of people, and I enjoy the argument because there's no right answer. What's more important, the rights of the individual versus the rights of society, right? So, when a person sells drugs, and even though nobody gets hurt from it, the government's perception is they're putting a poison on the street. I've heard federal prosecutors argue this and state prosecutors argue this, that, when you put a certain amount of a substance, into a community, it's going to land in the hands of children. It's going to, make its way through society. It's the degradation of society. We're going to have people that are less motivated to work. I mean, I've heard all the arguments, right? And at the end of the day, I think you have to get to the underlying motives of why a person might be doing it, right? So, some people it's greed, and if it's greed and it's monetarily related, I don't necessarily have a problem if that person goes to jail, right? If you're putting a substance, on the street, and it's solely to profit monetarily, and you don't care who you're selling it to, and whose hands it's falling in, then I think that's an issue. But the government has the ability to take that away. They can legalize, substances like they have in other countries, and certainly other states like Oregon. I've heard has like these opium dens where people can get safe needles, and and can use in these safe locations, so that they're not buying it from unknown people, right? And so government has that control. They just choose not to exercise that control. So, does the average citizen want people walking around, high and driving their cars high? Absolutely not. I don't believe they do. So again, it's one of those questions where there's really no good answer. I mean, I've met a lot of good people that, when marijuana was illegal, ended up doing decent amounts of time in prison, both federal and state, and it was over weed. And now we look back and I go, man, you got that much time for marijuana? And but when I put myself back in that time, because I started working in a prosecutor's office in 2003, became a lawyer in 2006, the back then, yeah, you sold, you got caught with a pound of weed, that was a lot, and you were going to go to jail for it. But now to think that we're going to put somebody in jail for having a pound of marijuana is almost absurd. So where we've come in 15 years, again, putting people in cages is, it's weird how I've evolved as a person and as a lawyer over the years. Just as a prosecutor, you take quite a bit of pride of putting somebody in jail, and then you start to have the realization that all right, there's certain crimes where people need to go to jail: murder, rape, the child sex offenses, and then you start looking at these drug cases a little bit differently, and that's when you really kind of realize you need to make the switch to criminal defense, because again, isolating someone from society should be reserved for probably the most serious offenders. And so when we're isolating a drug dealer, when we can put them on probation, we can supervise them, we have GPS monitoring, we have devices that get installed on your cell phone that enable federal and state probation officers to monitor a person. We can have people sign away their Fourth Amendment rights while they're on probation, so that probation officers can go to their house. I mean, is that not enough restraint to limit them getting back involved in it? Again, I don't know the answer to it, but again, I think we have too many prisons, and we have too many people in prison, and we have too many non-violent offenders in prison. And I think our government's starting to realize that, and I tend to be a little conservative, and I'm taking that point of view. That tends to be a liberal point of view, but I think even the conservatives are starting to realize people shouldn't be in jail for non-violent drug offenses. And I think we're making headway towards that, but again, I think we still have a lot of work to do.
And again, I tried it really hard not to, I don't try, I shouldn't say try, but do my best not to speak about politics. But you just said it.
It's so hard to keep it out of that that argument, because, again, I can see both sides of the argument, and it's, again, I don't think there's any right answer. A very conservative person would say, no, drug dealers need to go to jail. A very liberal person would be like, well, if they're nonviolent and they're not hurting anybody, why should we put them, and I steal the word cage from a friend of mine who's very liberal. He's a lawyer in DC, does a phenomenal job, but he's like, why are we putting people in cages for this? And, when you think about it as putting a human being in a cage, like an animal at the zoo, it changes your mindset about jail a little bit, and jail doesn't rehabilitate anybody. It teaches people how to be better criminals. It's a violent place. Drugs are rampant, and so again, I think we've lost the purpose of the punishment aspect of jail and the rehabilitative aspect of jail, because rehabilitation is just simply not there. It's isolating someone from society. So, why do you isolate people from society? Because they can't live according to society's norms. And, and again, society's norms have changed over the last, 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
I appreciate it. Yeah, and I know we're close to it, and we're gonna have a few more questions for you. So I appreciate
Sure.
your time. And lastly, just to finish the Veterans Treatment Court. So, what really made you? Obviously, the main reason you're a veteran. Obviously, that makes a lot of sense, and you want to help veterans. But what really made you want to be involved in the Veterans Treatment Court initially?
It's just the bottom line is it's a program that can really help veterans avoid the consequences of having a criminal conviction that is going to be a detriment to the rest of their life. So, if these courts were available, in the past, I think, there'd be a lot of veterans out there who are now convicted felons that wouldn't be, and they would have been given the skills to be able to, stay out of trouble in the future. I think once somebody gets branded as a felon, and I know, I always jokingly say with my clients who are faced with, felony charges, and let's say they get an offer for a misdemeanor, I'm like, do you want to take this offer? You want to take the risk of becoming a convicted felon? And if they choose that risk, trial on a felony, there's always a conversation about, if we lose, I hope you like manual labor or tree work or something like that. Now, again, I have some dear friends of mine that are convicted felons that are very successful business people because they've overcome, their situation. But the average person, I think they get down on themselves. These veterans treatment courts allow people who would otherwise probably be convicted of a felony, because the case is so strong against them, avoid that. And that's what makes me like to be involved in that, because, again, they're avoiding a stigma that's going to affect the rest of their life.
Is that true? Some attorneys actually start in prosecution and do really well with their win rate. Just want to see what your thoughts were being a prosecutor and transitioning to be a criminal defense attorney.
So I was fortunate enough. I worked for, two elected officials, Commonwealth attorneys in Virginia, that they didn't keep track of, our conviction rate. So I'll be honest with you, I don't know what mine was as a prosecutor. What they wanted us to do was do the right thing for the right reasons, right? And so, if you tried a case, especially when I was in Loudoun, the Commonwealth attorney, didn't want us to be scared to go to trial, right? So, some prosecutors, they'll wheel and deal every case, right? And some cases need to be tried. And so as long as we were trying cases, they didn't care whether we won or lost, and obviously they liked when we won and they didn't like when we lost, and if we made a mistake, there was, issues with that. But if we tried a good case and the jury just, didn't see it our way, again, we weren't penalized for that. So, my boss in Loudon, really his biggest thing that he said to me was, if you make a deal on a case or you go to trial on a case, just make sure that, you can justify why you did what you did and it's rational. Because if I get called out for it, I need to know what that logic was. And never had an issue with him, and, were there, I was always kind of veteran. So, were there cases that, I was able to work out because the person was a veteran? Absolutely. Now switching over to criminal defense was a hard thing for me, because when I initially went into the practice of law, I wanted to be a prosecutor. I wanted to prosecute homicides, and that's all I wanted to do. And I had that opportunity at very young age as a prosecutor. And, but what kind of started to bother me was I stopped trusting law enforcement as much as I did when I first became a prosecutor. You start seeing inconsistencies in their cases. Now, I'm not going to say the money wasn't a motivating factor, because I'd be a liar if I said that, right? When you're making, a government employee's salary and you go into private practice and you're going to, automatically make a third more, that can be very motivating. But you stay in that job because you believe in what you're doing as a prosecutor. When you no longer believe in that, it's time to move on. And again, I find being a criminal defense attorney a lot more fulfilling, because I'm able to help people at their level, one-on-one. And, I spend a lot of time, clients that will let me, I will spend a lot of time getting to know them, finding out about them. And again, putting them hopefully in a better situation than when they met me, resolve the issues that they have. So if they have a mental health issue, they have a substance abuse issue, we're addressing those, and we're sending them, to counselors to make sure that those issues are being addressed, not just because it helps their case, because it's going to make them a better person, and a lot of times I will tell a client, like, I hope I never see you again in this capacity. I don't mind running into you at a restaurant, but I hope you never have to call me for my services again. And that's very fulfilling, and, it's not necessarily the paycheck, because there's sometimes you'll get on the phone with someone, and, you'll start hearing their story about how they get charged with a crime, and, you'll discount your rate, so that you can just help that person. Or you get a phone call from, a buddy of yours who's an attorney in another state, or, in DC, and, they'll say, hey, I'm going to send you a case, and they'll give you the backstory about how they know them. And, and so again, I can't speak for every attorney, but, my thing as a criminal defense attorney is, just helping people. They're in the worst shape of their life. I mean, nobody is, I think, lower than when their liberty's at stake, so that to me puts a big burden on me to make sure that, it's not going to affect their future. It's not going to affect their job. I tell a lot of clients is like, if criminal offenses didn't affect your ability to earn a living, there'd be a lot more people committing crimes, right? So, especially in this area in DC, where so many people have security clearances and, government employment, and then they pick up something as simple as a reckless driving, they get worried that they're going to lose their clearance or they're going to lose their job. And, when you can have a professional tell them, like, hey, listen, don't stress about that. That's the least of my worries. I'm really concerned about how low we're going to get this for you, so your insurance doesn't go up. And their mind starts to switch towards, all right, this guy's really going to look out for me, or this guy, he knows what he's talking about. So that's very satisfying and fulfilling. So that's really why I do what I do.
Awesome. Appreciate it. And how can people, if anybody needed to reach you, going through something that need an attorney, how can people reach you?
So they can always email me at david@dischleylaw.com, and Dischley is spelled DISCHLEY. And then it's law.com. It's my first name, David. Or, hey, I give out my cell phone number to all my clients. So they're always welcome to text me or call me on my cell at 703-851-7137. My office number is 703-635-2424. If you have a criminal case, I prefer that you call the main number. But if you're just looking for some help, please have them call my cell phone or shoot me a text.
Thank you again, Attorney Dischley, for stopping by All in Motion. Look forward to having you back, sir, in the near future. Please be sure to check out allinmotion.com, our website. You can find all of our content on all of our episodes. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for tuning in. This is Jake, Cigar City from All in Motion. Take care and be safe.